the way that I view GMRI, and I think, this is why I think it's most important, is it's really kind of a way that we can communicate better with the government, because the government certainly has a lot of trust and has utilized the Gulf Maine Research Institute for a lot of their research as a pass-through for federal funding dollars. And Gulf Maine Research Institute has been very involved with trying to outreach directly to fishermen and form relationships on the ground with fishermen and sector managers. When sectors first started, to help develop operations plans for sectors, and that kind of evolved then into these sector meetings that GMRI hosts throughout the year, which is a really good way that sector managers have been able to be, and fishermen, in the same room as members of the National Marine Fisheries Service and the government, and really kind of hash out some of our issues together. And so, through those relationships, I think we've really been able to shape policy in a much more inclusive manner. The government officials and the policymakers and NIMPs are able to now communicate directly, one-on-one, not only with sector managers but also with fishermen, to hear, how NIMP's policy is affecting them, and to consider suggestions, that we make for improvements. And so I think without GMRI, there'd be much more difficult ways of, or it would be much more difficult to communicate with the National Marine Fisheries Service in a manner that I think is as effective as it has been. Because on a year-to-year basis there's so many new regulations and rules and restrictions that come down from the government, on top of what we already have learned to adapt to through sector management, that it's very difficult to plan a fishing business from one year to the next. So a great example of this is certainly the Gulf Maine cod assessment, where all the way up through 2011, the industry, and I think most researchers, had thought that the Gulf Maine cod stock has recovered, that we are well on our way to participating in a fully sustainable fishery. And kind of out of the blue, they came back with numbers that in order to rebuild the stock to levels where they think it should be, we're looking at a cut in Gulf of Maine cod allocation by up to 90%. So that level would certainly devastate some of the smaller sectors, and make it much more difficult for us to maintain our solvency. There's other examples of regulatory costs, including like the ATSI monitoring program, which industry has been tasked to pay for next year. It has been delayed at least a year. But this is a tremendous cost that industry is facing, and we're trying to find creative ways that we might be able to fund that. GMRI has been really helpful in trying to understand that issue, and trying to look at ways that they might be able to help sectors be creative in their financing and and their understanding of what their budgets are going to be in the future.